How do you move forward after losing a sister? For Alex Ostebo, the answer came through storytelling. In the depths of grief, she found healing by weaving her sister's memory into the pages of a fantasy world, creating a realm where she still lived.
In this episode, we sit down with Alex to explore her journey navigating the loss of her sister, the power of imagination and healing, and how her upcoming fantasy series, Realm Jumper, became a tribute to her sister's memory. Welcome, Alex. We're so happy to have you here on the Two Girls with Grief podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, Alex Ostebo is a fantasy writer and entrepreneur. After the 2023 passing of her sister, Denali, she embarked on a quest to honor her sister's memory, crafting Denali's heroic odyssey through a mysterious afterlife realm in her forthcoming novel, Realm Jumper, the inaugural installment in the Afterlife series. So, we're so excited to hear about the book, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, we wanted to go back and start talking about your sister. I've also dealt with sister loss, so we're going to start off talking about that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, do you mind sharing a little bit about your sister, kind of like in like a tongue-in-cheek way, like bring her to life for the listeners, and I don't know, something special about her?
Yeah, so Denali and I grew up 3.5 years apart. She was like much taller than me. To just like our personalities, we were like twins. A fun story that my mom always says about Denali, like growing up, is that she didn't even learn to talk until she was like 2 because I did all the talking for her. I forced her to read early because I couldn't stand the fact that she couldn't read with me. And there was this kind of almost seamless gap between us, even though it was 3.5 years, which is I was a freshman when she was a senior. We're extremely close growing up. It's always hard to try to sum up someone that you've known so much and so much of your life and be like, here's a soundbite of like what Denali is.
Yeah.
But truly what we are is we always have been is like these twin flames that have followed each other through life. Another thing about our growing up is that we were a military family in the age before social media. So it was really easy to lose touch with a lot of other people in our lives. But Denali and I were like the one constant that even transcended into, adulthood too. And that's the kind of person that she was to me and especially to our family. And personality wise, she was like, I feel like I'm like spicy and can get angry and moody. And like, I felt like I had a very flawed person. And she always was just this very patient and super kind. I always, especially now when you lose someone, you kind of look back and you're like, you appreciate all those things about her. And she was just this very fun, this very caring, this very community oriented individual. And so, yeah, so I feel like she really is more of the sparkle, even though I feel like I was this one that was a little bit more gregarious and things like that. So, yeah, that's Denali.
I say that my sister was like the sweet one, and that's what she was known for. My dad's nickname for her was Sweetheart, and she was just like the nicer one, and I was the one that I just remember like standing up for her when we were younger because she was like chubby as a little kid, and like Filipinos are just brutal with that stuff, and I would always stand up for her. And I just remember it was funny. I mean, she was an older sister, and I relied on her so much, but it was definitely a dynamic where I'm like, I'm the one that's probably going to get us in trouble with something. And she's like the sweet one that's going to like figure it out. So yeah, it is interesting like how different siblings are. What you said she was your older sister?
She's actually my younger sister.
Oh, younger sister. Oh, sorry. You were senior and she was a freshman.
Yeah. There are 3.5 years difference, but I'm the older one. But
and
she was
also
taller. I don't know why that I don't know why that always happens. Or like I feel like the younger sister just like gets some broccoli or something and they just grow.
That's funny. We said at the same time.
Is that with you too?
No, we have a younger brother, and he is exponentially taller than both me and my sister. So he towers over us, but he is the baby of the family. So yes, in some adjacent way, yeah.
Kendall's like 6 feet tall, though. How tall is your sister?
Not tall to me, and I have no reason to think that. I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm already
right.
pretty tall, but yeah, my sister, she's pretty tall too. She's like, I think 5'9" or 5'10", but she's considered the short one out of 3 of us.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the taller one too. I'm 5'4" and my sister was 5'2". So it
Oh
definitely
my goodness,
was
really?
it happens. I feel like it happens more often than not, is that the younger sister for some reason shoots up. And I've seen
Yeah.
videos of you and Denali and the same thing, like she was taller. And it's funny that it happens. I don't know. It's just a nice thing to be able to grow taller than your sister sometimes.
Yeah, she loved it. She'd always like, yeah, like kind of tongue in cheek be like, "You're a shrimp," or like, like try to tease me in that way. Like it was her one thing that she could like really get me for. Like I'd be, and I remember growing up, I'd pretend to be offended and all these things. So yeah, it's a fun dynamic.
Yeah, from watching your videos, I feel that same thing too. And I know talking to Kendall, like she is so close to her sister. I feel like the sister bond is so unique when you have like a close sibling. I get that not all siblings are close, but my sister was like my favorite person, and she was the older one, so I leaned on her for everything. Like Google didn't exist. She was the one that I called. She helped me with everything.
Yeah.
And it's still something that I just hate that she is gone. And it just like is not fair. You should never have to live life without your sister. But I don't think people talk like it's so freaking hard losing the person that like was your person.
Yeah, I think more than like I don't know. It's very much feels like a reflection of losing yourself. Like it's very humbling in terms of like I'm blessed to still have my two parents, and I can only imagine Rachel what that's like. But you can see what it's like to be lost as well. You see yourself in your sister because that's your sister, and especially with me, it was like that's like my twin, and then she's gone, and you are actually like I feel like confronted with my own mortality too and wonder like, would it be better if it was me? Like, should it have been me? Like I wish it was me or whatever. There's this comparison thing to it, which I feel like is very unique to that sister or maybe even just like a sibling, that's the same gender, especially like that. Do you know what I mean? That feeling. So I'm confronted a lot with that, and I think it just makes it really hard. And if in my family too, you feel like you can't really be the one grieving because you look at a lot of other losses around you. Like, can you imagine losing a child? Can you imagine losing the person you were going to marry? And you compare that grief. So you feel like, oh, I'm just going to like be strong because, I don't want my parents to fall apart, or I'm going to be strong because, you know, Taylor, her fiance, he lost Denali like every day, right? It was so visceral for him day one, that like that person he gets breakfast with every morning is gone. And for me, especially during adulthood, it's that person that you call every week or something. It feels, you try to compare it to that. So I think that's how I've started to dissect that grief of a sibling loss. And I don't know if that is relevant to anything you felt, Rachel.
Yeah, I for me it's hard because right, it's like your sister or your sibling. They're not just one person. They're a lot of people to a lot of people. And I
Yeah.
definitely saw that in her celebration of life, is that so many people showed up. I was like, I don't have this many people that I'm nice to like are gonna show up. And it's a good reminder for me to like be more open. And I think honestly have like dealing in the grief in public has made me more so that. And because of that, I feel like it's also opened me up to like having deeper connections with people because I'm more open in general and not like shutting myself off. But it is something where it is hard because it's like she has all these really good friends, and it's like I'm jealous of all the time that she spent with them as an adult outside of the house. And at one point she lived in New York for like I think it might have been like 6 years, and I like barely visited her, which is like, why did I do that? I was like not big on travel. I'm like, I should have visited her, and I feel like I missed so much of her life and her growing up because I didn't visit her in New York as much until like the last few years. And I feel like I just wish I had seen more of that. And me and Kendall recently did this life book, which is like this memorial book for a loved one. So Kendall did one for her dad. I did one for my sister. And it's like where people submit stories of them and memories and photos and recipes and all the stuff. And her ex-boyfriend at the time, he was just like not submitting one. And I was like, I'm literally going to figure out how to put a hex on you if you do not send in a freaking story, because you cannot gatekeep the New York version
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
Lori and not put her in this damn book. I was telling her other friends, like, I'm not going to talk to him anymore if he doesn't submit anything. Like, that's how serious I'm taking this. Like, you are gonna submit something. And it is interesting because even like, when she passed away, it's like you're giving away stuff, right? And like he wanted her New
Mhm.
York ID and I wanted her New York ID, but like part of me was like, okay, I'll be kind and give it to him. And I have a stack of her IDs and I'm like, does it not matter that I am missing one? I don't like look at them all the time. But then part of me is like, didn't want to give it away. It's like that
Yeah.
was her first love, so I wanted to be supportive of that. And like my sister passed after my dad, so it was like I saw my brother, but my mom had such a hard time with it. And it was really hard to deal with that because she had a hard time, but she was pretending she wasn't having a hard time in a sense, like really leaning into faith.
Mhm.
And that made it hard because it felt like she was kind of being distant because she didn't want to also think about like how sad I was and how hard it was for me. But like when my sister passed, that's the first time that I ever thought, and like the only time I thought was like, I don't know how to live in a world without her. And I don't want to, and not in like a active way, but just like, I don't know how to be here. I don't know, want to spend another day without my sister. I don't know what that is. And it's just a very unique relationship that you have with a
Mhm.
sibling and especially a sister that it's just crazy when they're gone. Sisters are so special, and I'm still so jealous when I see other sisters and siblings that are
My
still
gosh,
there.
that is the hardest part. That is so hard still, like, just seeing cute sisters together. You never value it as much when you have it too, You're like, "Oh, my sister took my shirt. My sister did this. Like, Denali's annoying me so much." And then you think back on it now after passing, and you're just like, "God, like, who the fuck why did I care about that?" I don't know. It's just yeah, I think especially, like, the little sister, big sister dynamic and especially when you have just like two sisters in a family too, you have this connection that's just very special.
Yeah, listening to Rachel talk about her sister, it's obviously the more painful one when Rachel talks about Lori. It's the one that
Yeah,
the one where Rachel chokes up more because you expect to lose your parents. That's an
yeah,
inevitability. Like that's something whether we like to think about it or not, it's going to happen in the natural process of life. But like losing your siblings so young is it's such a caught off guard type of thing. And it's like you expect to live your whole life with your siblings and you worry about that when you're old. You don't expect it to happen when
yeah,
you're so young in life. Like it really is like what you said, you're losing a part of yourself.
yeah. I think about too, like, which always gets me is when you kind of think like, at some point I'm gonna live on this earth, like God willing, right? Like you live on this earth longer than I'll even have known Denali. Like
Uh,
like when I'm 60 years old, like that's just so much time that you get and you're just and like how all this stuff that happens and all these people it's crazy just to have that happen so soon. But yeah,
There is
that's
this
what I
like,
think.
and I imagine you probably deal with this, but I'm the oldest of my siblings. And if you were talking about natural progression and age and if things go
Mhm,
perfectly, if things don't go awry or like accidents don't happen, that I should be like in theory the first one to pass and they would grieve
mhm,
me. And I can't imagine as an older sibling, like it like makes me tear up right now thinking about it, like not having them because I expect it to be me first. Like you said, like you expect it to
mhm.
be you. You're like, could I have switched places somehow and take that we could all have that conversation with God and be like, I would take this for her so she could live a life.
Yeah, I think about it all the time, and I've made the decision that I would, just because she had so much. I wanted her to have that wedding, and like you were saying, like you saw the celebration of life and how many people came for her, and it was like this like the visual element of taking the list of people that were going to attend her wedding and just saying, hey, will you attend her celebration of life? It's like God, you just want that, it's very like right there in front of you. Like what I would give to have Denali be able to experience that the beauty of getting married and the beauty of having like a kid. I know she would. Like I know she would have been the first one and I would have been so happy for her and I can picture it and I just want that for her. So yeah, I think that's what I was saying earlier when it's like because she's your sister, you can see yourself. She's a reflection of you within the family. She's a reflection of you. So yeah, it's very easy to get confronted with your own mortality and what life is like without you or without them. And even just like how easy it is. Like, so my dad, like a really pivotal moment for him, a really like difficult moment for him was when you know, have to do someone's death affairs and you tell the government that this person is gone, and then they send you like after all this belabored work, they send you this envelope and they're like, this is everything, and you're just like,
Yeah.
this is it. This is this person. It's just this freaking envelope like this, and they're like, here, and like the value of a person and what a person is in this world is really something that it's been. I never wanted to know what this was like, but I now am very, yeah, you kind of get confronted with the realities of death and things like that. So not to be morbid, but yeah.
No, we're a
Mhm.
morbid podcast. The
Oh my
you bringing
God.
up Denali having a kid, and that's something I think about a lot is like my sister loved kids. Like I was always like, I think I want kids, but I'd have my mom and my sister, like I'd be able to drop them off. Like they loved kids. I
Yeah.
knew that I would have that help. And the fact that like my sister never got to have kids, I never got to meet her kids. If I have kids now, it's going to be a shit ton harder than it would be
Yeah.
before. That village is gone. And it's like, even like a wedding, I'm like, that sounds shitty. Like to me, it just sounds shitty. Like I don't know in what way it would work that it just wouldn't be 20,000 times sadder than happy. Like I don't
Hmm.
know how that would work. And it's just crazy. You think all these things like you miss out on. And I'm like, if she had a kid, I would just like at least have a piece of her to
Yeah,
continue
that
on
is
or
such a good
something.
point. Mm.
That part
Yeah,
kills me.
that part
I'm
kills
like,
me too. I would love to have a piece of Denali in that way, and it's like then you have something more than just an envelope. I'm wanting to talk a bit about this on my channel, and I'm curious about what you guys think. But um the act of going through someone's belongings after they pass is like so like, is there a right way to do it? Because like I so the Ostebo way, like my family, maybe it's like the military side of us is like, you know, when Denali, so we went in and it was like operation, you know, execute mission of like getting through her stuff. Do you want to keep this? Do you want to keep this? Do you want to keep this and that? And this happened like the week after, like the week that she passed. Like my parents came into Kentucky with into Taylor and Denali's house, and we just started going and like my parents started going through everything, cutting everything. And I'm like standing there like this, like, do I want Denali soft? Like I don't know. And then like and even Taylor had to be like, you guys should have stopped. We can't go through like anything else. Like, and basically had to kind of put a kibosh on that because it was happening so fast. But we did make a lot of progress, like throwing out a lot of different things. And now it's been a year and a half, and I'm just like the things that I wish I want, even like shoes that don't fit me, you know, I just like, I would take the shoe. And so I don't know. It's like, is there a right way to do it? How did you guys approach going through a loved one's things?
and yeah, I mean, I think it's a very hard thing. A few years ago, I had a roommate and I just had all these storage boxes of stuff. And I just remember her saying, like, you have so much stuff. And the thing that I didn't say, which I really wanted to, which I would now, but at the time I wasn't as like open my grief. I'm like, yeah, you have both your parents and your sister die and see what you end up with. Like you see what you have a hard time
Mm,
letting go of. And it's really hard, and each situation was unique. Like my dad, I think he wasn't a hoarder, but he had a lot of stuff. And so going through his stuff was hard. Like we had to hire people, and it was just a lot of stuff to go through. And it was hard to even find like what do you keep and what do you give away when there's just so much stuff. And we were
mm,
in the Philippines, so it wasn't like you could even take that much stuff back with you. And so that was really hard and figure out like what do you sell, what do you keep, all the stuff. But it is really weird when you're like, this is the sum of a person. It's like their stuff and you
yeah.
have to go through it. And it's really hard because you're trying to pick what you keep and what you don't keep. And finding stuff, it's like, you don't always want to find stuff that people have or, people's secrets
Mhm.
in their things. And it's really hard to go through that. And like my sister's stuff was really hard. And it was like she was smaller than me. She was very petite and she was 5'2". So like I wanted to keep more of her clothes and, like, made sense, and, like, some of her friends are like, "I'm gonna take these jeans even though they don't fit, I'm gonna make it fit." Like, it was just really weird to, like, pass that stuff out, and for my moms, it was weird because I guess the Filipino tradition, which I don't know about, is like when someone passes away, you just like get their stuff out of your place like immediately. Kind of sounds like what you guys are doing.
Mhm.
Um, and they basically like my mom was also in the Philippines. They sent her stuff, and I was just like, they spent so much money sending to us. I'm like, half of it was like we just ended up giving it away. And I'm like, if you
Yeah.
had given us a moment to just go through it and go there, we would have had a time to like properly get rid of this. And still I'm like, there's so much stuff. I'm like, where is it? Like, I don't know where it went. I don't know if you guys took it already, decided that you were going to keep it without sending it to her, like sending it to us. Like, it's so hard when you think about all these different things, but it is really weird. And I think it is such an emotional piece going through people's stuff and then deciding who gets
What
what.
how do you yeah.
Yeah, and what do you keep? Like, I have some sweaters of my sister, like, I found in her stuff, which is funny, is I found this necklace that she borrowed from me in, like, high school, and she said she didn't have it because I really liked it, and we've thought about it so much. Found it in her stuff.
Secret came out.
Yeah, and I found it in her stuff, and it's one of those things, and that's like, okay, well, I have it now, but, like, I'd rather have my sister than the stupid freaking necklace that I bought in high school that I was obsessed with that I could care less about now, and I have it still, but I'm like, I haven't worn it. It's just kind of one of those things. So, yeah, it's just really hard to go through people's stuff, and each situation was different, but I do have a random amount of things that I was been trying to more recently kind of go through again, but it's like there's no right or wrong way about it. But I don't know, Kendall, how did you get rid or go through your dad's stuff?
Yeah, and almost a reverse. My dad was like a minimalist and didn't really have a lot of things. But I think what was different was that since I was the executor of the estate, was terrified to get rid of anything, especially like papers and receipts for things. I was like saving random ass receipts because I was like, I don't know if this is gonna be important later, or like taxes from 10 years ago. And I'm like, do I keep these? Do I throw these away? Like, I
Mhm.
still have a box full of random papers just because I didn't want to mess up any of the paperwork part of it. But I think, like, especially with the papers, it was his handwriting that I found. Like, anything with his handwriting, I was like, we got to save that. We got to save that. And it's funny that we're talking about this because even I have these two bags. So, my brother, sister, and I, we sorted through his clothes, and whoever wanted whatever took what they want. And we still had like a lot of his clothes left over. So I donated a lot of his suits to like Goodwill. But there was just
Mhm.
a lot of shirts that he would wear. Yeah, where you're like, I would never wear that ever again.
Dave's plumbing. I don't care about Dave's plumbing.
Yes, I'm
Like
like, why do I have that? And why is there 47 holes in this? And why did you
yeah.
keep that? But we still had a bunch of these like button downs and like his jeans. I mean, I live in Texas,
Mm.
so jeans is culture here. And just this week, my sister's birthday is about to come up, and I was like, you know what? My dad's been gone for like 5 years. My sister is the one who's the most like my dad in demeanor and personality. So I'm taking all that leftover clothes that I haven't figured out what to do with in the past 5 years, and I'm gonna have it made into like a blanket. And so all
I
just
love
kind of the
that.
swatches and jeans that just so it also just doesn't go to waste and it's not sitting in a bag. And so yeah, she'll get if she's listening, you'll get that for your birthday. But
Cover your
just like a
ears.
little yeah, just like a little piece of our dad that she can, especially in like the craziness of life right now. And we talk about it of like how no one prepares you for going through grief, but then going through like the craziness of the world right now. And I just
Mhm.
wanted to gift her a little something of her dad and be like, he's still here, he's still with you. Like something to cuddle with when you're crying at night.
That's so thoughtful. I love that. I feel like that's something that I should have done. That's exactly the same thing because then I had all these like crop tops that were like from Forever 21, and I'm like 30 of them, and I'm like I could. I wish I had just kept them, but I was like I'm not gonna wear this like crop top that says like cowgirl. But it would have been nice to do that. So that's really thoughtful, Kendall.
Kendall is a very thoughtful gift giver. I wish I had done that too. I wish I had like kept some of her like random shirts, just like turn it into like something that I could use. But it's so hectic at the time. It's kind of hard to decide like what do you keep, what do you take with you, and it's like high pressure, right? It's like or some people
Yeah,
get stuck in time and they never touch anything, and it's like I don't know how I feel about that either. Of like when you just don't touch any of their stuff and keep it there. I've seen so many videos about that where like they don't move anything that they've
Mhm.
touched. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I feel like the early days of Denali's passing, it was like such a shock. Like it doesn't really feel real. So like you're for me, I was like more willing to be like, well, I'm not her same shoe size, so I don't really need to keep her shoes, or like I was very. It was easier for me to be pragmatic because I was literally just like smacked in the face. Like I don't know.
I feel like that's
Became
survival mode.
Yeah, you're just in survival mode. You're like, yeah, you're right. We can't just leave like her used cotton balls everywhere. Like, we must get rid of everything. Not that I wish we had kept those, but like, you're just like kind of on autopilot, doing the motions of like, this is what they do. You clean up the stuff. And now I've become much more sentimental. Like, I feel like maybe it's for better or for worse because like I might just have like entire closet full of Denali stuff and like some of it would fit me and some of it wouldn't. So um, but what I did do though is I saved some of her like classic shirts and I put them in a little bag. And then like a year later, like a few months ago, I like opened it up and it like still smelled like her. And I was like crying. I couldn't know. I was this is insane. And there's actually still a box full of her stuff at Taylor's as her fiance's as well. So during the wedding we'll go and see that. But yeah, it's interesting when you were talking about that ID. I'm like probably felt very similar too, where it's like you initially like feel like, why am I the one that gets this something special? Because you kind of compare the grief and you feel like this, but then you realize that it's okay to be a little bit selfish because I think especially with the direct family because like what's happening now with Taylor's getting remarried and it's like he's not going to want a box of her stuff, but at the time I was like I could never make him part with this box of stuff. It just brings to reality how forever that sister loss, that parent loss is, especially to those people in the immediate family, and how there's nothing really similar to them that like you can't get a new sister, you can't get a new mom, you can't get a new dad. So
Yeah, that's like a good segue into the next topic since you brought up Taylor and your sister. I think first we can touch on the stuff part, which I think is really hard. I think every grief experience is really hard, but it is a weird
Mhm.
thing where it's like, obviously, you'd want to give everything, like, you'd want to respect their partnership and like all the stuff he has. But then you're like, now, I'm thinking, I was like, that person's like, what is the right decision? There's no right decision. It's like, do you keep the stuff, of this person when you're trying to move forward? It's really hard. And we have friends that have lost people in our grief support group, and not to share any of their personal stuff, but it's what they hear sometimes is like people just expect you to get remarried and then you're over that loss. And I don't think that's true either. I think once you lose somebody, you're always with them. Like you'll be sad but happy, like you're not going to get over
Yeah,
them. But it is a weird thing of it's like, as a new partner, do you want your partner's old love stuff still there, even though it's like they're no longer
belongings. Yeah,
here? What is the right answer in that? I don't know that there is a right answer. It's really difficult.
yeah. If there was some sort of a like how-to guide to handle this, please like pass it my way because I don't really know the answer. And so you kind of have to just live with what feels right with you. And, for some people, and also it depends, I think, a lot on like your relationship with that individual's like loved one. For example, like that transcends, I think, beyond the relationship that he's going to his ever changing relationship with Denali. So, for example, Taylor's relationship with Denali, and he'll always have that love. And I know in my heart that he will always like love Denali, and she'll always have this special place. But it's going to be a morphing relationship in terms of the amount of time he thinks about her. Like one day he'll have been with his current fiance longer than he'll have known, even known Denali. And so that's going to be ever changing. But I think what matters, what I kind of decided to reflect on was like my relationship with Taylor. That's something here, that's something now, that's something that is like a tangible thing that, so I looked at that relationship and it's something that like, he's like a brother to me. We have always been very close. Like he actually asked my husband to be one of the 10 groomsmen in his wedding party. So like that just kind of gives you perspective on like how ingrained in my family and my life and our life that he was. We just clicked, he's also our age too. He's like 3 years older than Denali or so. And yeah, so from that perspective, it was really important for me to continue, to maintain this relationship, and almost in spite of the pain that it causes me. And I was like, would I regret more not going to this he invited me to the wedding, obviously. And so it was like, would I regret more not attending this wedding, or would I regret more, like, I guess, keeping my own heart protected and not having to go through the pain of the wedding. And so I had to make that decision, and I'm going. But my parents are not. So and they still love him, and they FaceTime with him all the time, and we FaceTime with his current fiance too. Like, I think that relationship has been a really important piece in like being able to maintain this relationship. Like, it was always my hope that he would find someone that's very comfortable with us and the fact that we're a big part of his life. But like, she's always on the FaceTimes with him. And I've met her before. She's very, very, very sweet. Cannot say that enough. So I'm very lucky. But, you know, her and Denali look very similar. So that's like, it's like, there's also this like, I remember the first time I met her, I was like, oh my God, she looks like Denali. And so, yeah, it's complicated. It's very complicated. And these are kind of just the notes that I've been figuring out in my head.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that it's evolving feelings and it's ever changing because, I mean, what a unique and a good and a bad way situation you're in, and that is a lot of feelings surrounded. And like they're not surface level feelings, those are very deep personal feelings. And like I applaud like you and your family for being so like I guess practical but like mature, because I could imagine like I wouldn't blame anybody either for being like,
Mm,
I've got to sever this is like I got to cut off that friendship type of thing because it hurts that bad, and I wouldn't blame that person either. But also like in what you're just explaining, like that reflection of like there's good and the bad, and like there's going to be
mhm.
love in that, and of course you're going to see your sister at that wedding, and like but also you're going to see
Yeah,
him be happy too. It's so complicated.
it's so complicated. I mean, it's made extra complicated by like, I think the speed of which is like, it's like naturally like, well, is there a timeline for this? Like, there isn't.
Yeah.
But, I think everybody in their own world has like a preferred timeline for them, right? Like, I'm sure for him, like he's like the kind of guy that like loves love, so he wants, like he always has been. He's like a romantic. He's just like so sweet. He's very uh, you know like very faith based. I think for him, I think his timeline was, and I can't speak for him, but like I imagine that in his position, like especially when you like wake up alone every single day, it's like a week seems like way more time than for someone like me who like she wasn't a part of my daily life. She's someone I think about every day, but like I can imagine, and I have my husband too. Like I'm very like, I couldn't have done this without like he is a big part of how I can have these mental gymnastics and how I can be very mature about this because I have him. I know he's going to be at the wedding. I know he'll always have my back, and he was so supportive. So me saying that this timeline it feels really short when he's like the one that has no one. He had no one, literally. Like so for me, my timeline is like I would love to have like you know maybe like 3 years or something to just like really go through this and feel like it's time. So yeah, I think that this timeline element is something that a lot of people that have been following my story have brought up as being something that like is really hard, and it definitely is. But like you said, Kendall, it's just like I call them mental gymnastics of just like feeling, the pain that I feel, and then like putting in the work mentally to this emotion to make a better decision, accepting them, but figuring out like long term in my life, do I want to sever my relationship with Taylor? Or like he's a part of her to me, and like when I'm with him, I feel closer to her. So like, you know, which feeling do I act on? This feeling of like I can't go to Denali's wedding that's not Denali, or do I never see Taylor again? So I don't know.
I think it's such a complex thing because there's no right or wrong answer, right? It's one of those things like if I could pop out another sister somehow, I would totally want another
Yeah.
sister, and
Very good point.
there's no solution for that, right? And when you lose a partner, not that they're replaceable and not that the grief isn't always there, but it's a different relationship of that you want to do life with them, right? And
Mhm.
I think it also makes you think that life is short. So I think it's a hard thing where it's like, so what are you gonna do? Are you gonna spend years and years not dating someone else because you want to honor them? Is that really honoring them in the right way? Like, what is the right way to honor
Mhm.
someone? And it's a really hard thing because I also wouldn't want someone to never date again or never find love again. It's hard enough finding it, period. But then to like tell someone you can never find it because you've lost someone and that was the card you're dealt, it's really hard. And when I try to think about it, I'm like, I would pop out another sister 100%. If I had the opportunity that I could just do that or parents, like I would do that. I would choose that card to just get new ones, but you can't replace those people. And again, not replacing a partner because there's no replacing who they were to your life and how much you love them. But it is a hard thing. It's like you want to respect whatever they decide. Like I see a lot of older, especially older men that do get married really quickly. And sometimes it's like they're very traditional and they can't survive without a wife. There's some people like that. It's like they literally can't. They don't know how to survive without a partner. But it is hard because it's like life is short. So I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I can't judge someone for that. And also I think everyone's grief is different. So I don't know. I think when people just say like that means they don't love them or they didn't love them, I think that's really unfair. And that's also like this to like your sister and their love. When people say stuff like that, it's like you don't know them and you're just like basing on this outside view. And it's like you don't know the situation at all. And I'm still close to my sister's friends. I talk to a lot of her friends still. Like I mentioned earlier when we weren't recording, like one of her sister's best friends is dating her ex-boyfriend. And it's like 9 years later, my sister's been gone. My sister's gonna be gone, have been gone for 9 years. It's probably like 8 years or 7.5 or something, or years that he's moved on. But it's been a long time. And I've kept in touch with him. Like he went to my mom's funeral. And it is a weird thing, but it's also like I always wanted him to be happy again because my sister, like 25% would have wanted him to be happy. She always cared about his happiness. Even when I was like, don't date him anymore, like just because they were just going through stuff, like she was on his side, she always wanted to help him. She would have done anything. So it's like even if I was angry at him, like I know she wouldn't be. And just as like
Mhm.
the sister where you're like, you're mad at you do anything wrong, like F you, like like you're dead to me. I'm a thing. And I just know like my sister would love him regardless, but it is a weird thing, and I haven't seen it in person yet, but it is something that, like, I'm like, I want you guys to be happy, and if you guys are left behind and whatever, it's something I support, but it's a weird thing, right? Like, it's still gonna be weird to see it, and I know some people are, like, shocked, but I'm like, I'm fine with it, as her sister because life is short, and it's like, if you find happiness again with somebody, like, I support that, and I support them finding happiness, but it is weird in a sense, just because you're like, when I talk about my sister now, it's like, we always just would cry together and talk, and it's like, do we still do that? Like, what do we
Yeah.
do? And so it's a weird thing. I think people are so opinionated on how things should be. Like, it's like you're judging outside of the house. Like, you don't know what it is to experience that, and I think until you're the one experiencing it, like, you can't say, like, I can't tell someone how to move on or how to do this or how to do that. Like, do what's right for you, and you can just try to be supportive of them when they do that. But, yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, but I did even see comments, people are, like, so judgy of it, and it's like, it's a
So
complex
judgy. Oh my
thing.
god. It is always funny. Like I had to stop reading the comments and responding to even the one comments that I wanted to respond to because everyone had so many opinions. Yeah, it's like like I can't be like you can't expect someone to be alone forever, or like alone even for any longer than their heart wants to be, just for your own sake. And I've been saying this a lot because in the early days, I felt really bad for all the things that Denali was going to miss out on. And I was getting a bit stuck on that. Like, oh, Denali's never going to have this. Denali's never this. And you kind of get broken. And then I had to do the mental gymnastics of saying that I can't go crazy feeling sorry for the people that aren't here, and you have to really put that effort on focusing on the happiness of the people that are here. You honoring that individual, and I mean, we'll talk about my book next, and like, I'm the biggest person about honoring that person that's gone. But you can't get caught in this cycle of saying, like negating someone else's happiness and like, finding love again for someone that is, in the afterlife. Like you have to focus on, I guess, and I had to focus on my own happiness, and I had to get out of that thing of being like, Denali, I miss this, Denali, I miss that. I wish I had done this, wish I had done that, because I was like, we're all living, and increasing those relationships with your family and with your friends and stuff like that. Those are the ways that you can honor that person that you lost in some way, because you're making a positive change in your life because of that person that was lost. And so that was a big thing that helped me as well with my grief, was being like, do I want Denali's loss to make me a worse person, or would it be better for it to make me a better person? And that's hard. It's easy to say and it's really hard to do, but it's that mental, like just kind of saying that like as a mantra all the time, like Denali would have reached out to my Nana, Denali would have reached out to my mom, so yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Kendall and I talk about that sometimes, of like, sometimes we wish that we didn't care about being a good person, because some people are just, there's just so many like just mean, awful people in this world. And we're like, but we actually care to be nice and try to put good things out in the world and be a good, positive influence, like in the grief space, and support people. But it's like so many people don't. And we're like, sometimes we wish that we didn't care about that, just because it's so much harder to be.
I wish I was a bitch.
Yeah, like it's so much easier to just go that way than be like, no, I want to be a good person, and I want to do, live a good life with their honor. Like that's even hard to do, because it's really easy to get stuck in the death of it all and the sadness of it all.
Yeah.
And it's so hard.
And Rachel, we have the best excuse. Kendall, Rachel, we have the best excuse to be bad people. Like no one would blame us for like being
exactly.
assholes, and like fucking just like, if someone says something like you don't like, you're like, bah, because like we have a reason.
Yeah.
We have on our shoulder. We should have chips on our shoulders. So it's like harder for us to do this, but I think it's also better. So I understand. I'm like, sometimes I just want to be like, I'm so mad, and no one would blame me. But yeah, we're gonna have to be better people. Damn it.
Yeah. Seriously, I'm like, oh, they'd be wanting me to have a good life. And I mean, even just like the death, like you said, like you have to let go of so many things of like the what ifs, because you can get stuck in that of just like, what if they were here? What did they didn't get experience? They didn't get to do that.
Yeah.
Or even just like I got very tied down and like, oh, I have to now honor them in every single day. And like my mom and my sister passed away right before my birthday. Like they passed away this month. And like I used to be so obsessed with like how I'm gonna honor their death days, and it's like, and then like my birthday didn't even matter, because my sister's birthday is in March, and it's like I would bypass like doing something for my birthday to celebrate my sister's birthday, and it was just becoming so much where I was like, I'm so focused on honoring all these freaking days, and I'm not focusing on my life, because I'm like, I'm like, they're not here to celebrate Father's Day or Mother's Day or Siblings Day or whatever the fuck day. Like they're not here for that. I am, and I'm so worried about like, do I post something? Do I do this? And it's like. Who gives a damn? Like, it is my life that I'm trying to figure out. And I need to focus on living my life and not just like living in their death or like honoring their death, because that's not really honoring them at the end of the day. They don't care about those
Living
different
is
days.
honoring them.
Post. Yeah. Living good is honoring them. Like not living
Living
sad.
good is honoring them. Yeah. Going to their grave or placing a flower on the grave and like, or like posting about them all the time. Like those are great things to do but like the best way to honor someone isn't that. That's not for anybody. What is good is living and like doing something that you love and making sure that like, I don't know, that like something that what they would want the most. And like, this is the thing that that they would want is they would want to be alive. And so by throwing the life that you have away, I have to say it to myself all the time, but like,
Me too.
That's, because sometimes I feel bad. Like I feel bad when I like post, like right after Denali passed, it was like everybody surrounded me, like my entire family and like my husband's family. He has 9 siblings, and they were a massive support group for me. And they were like, only when I was comfortable, but they were like, taking me to the Denali's favorite concerts and like doing certain things. And I was like, I'm at a concert, and then Denali died 2 months ago. Like I'm a fucked up person, and I had to get out of that because like I'm like, no, I'm at a concert and I'm like listening to the song that she loved and I'm like thinking about her and like we're all together, like, and I felt like someone's gonna judge me, someone's gonna say I didn't love her because I like went to this concert and like or like I went to this festival or something. And I was like, Denali loved festivals, like she loved them. Like I went to have my festivals with her. And there was so much during that time that I felt closer to her than I would if I was crying in my bed. So I think that was a piece of.
Yeah, they definitely would want us to live their life. And yeah, I think it's sometimes it's like outside pressure, right? You don't know what people are thinking and you don't want people to think badly of how you're dealing with it. And at the end of the day, it's like you just really have to not care because no one will get what you're feeling. No one's gonna get that exact feeling or how hard it is. And it's like, yeah, if I'm at a concert having fun, good, because I'm probably also crying at night, missing them, or crying about a
Yeah.
random drop of the hat or seeing something. So it's like, let me get the
Yeah.
happiest of happy moments. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think Kendall's mentioned. I know Kendall. Did you mention like feeling guilty about being happy before?
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned that a couple times in the support group. Whereas a lot of people who are very new to their grief journey, trying to find happy things, and then as you know, as you're grieving, so much of your happiness is a part of the sadness, and you can be the
Mm.
happiest you've been and be like, "Oh, I wish they were here."
Yeah.
And at the beginning, I think when you're trying to figure it out, because it's so confusing and a new feeling that you're experiencing, you're like, should I be sad right now? Like, I feel guilty for
Yeah.
being happy and they're not here and they're dead. And yet I'm living and trying to find beauty in the world again when the world's got gray. It's such a conflicting thing. Even like Rachel and I met last year and just her on repeat being like finding little joys in your day, like really changed
Mhm.
my look on life of like, yeah, you deserve, even in your grief, when you're the most saddest and confused and hurt you've ever been, that you still deserve these little joys. Like, because that is living a good full life.
I try to
Just like
focus
a
on
good
that.
coffee. Like even if it's just a coffee or just like a moment, like a sunrise or sunset. I think it doesn't have to be big for sure. I love that.
Coffee for sure is one of those things. Sometimes when I'm like feeling down, getting coffee is honestly one of those things where I'm like, this will get me into a good mood. This will get me into like getting outside, socializing, talking to somebody else.
Mhm.
Sometimes you just have to start small. And there's so much sadness also because I lost so many freaking people. But I'm like, I'm happy for every happy moment, because I don't feel guilty because they would want me to be happy. And I know people hate that phrase, but I feel like until you actually believe it, then you don't care. Like, no one should say that to you, really, I don't think. But I think you have to know that and believe it and channel it
Mm.
because you need whatever you can channel in your freaking life to like get you through. You need like whatever bit you can take of them. But so for me, I'm like, if I can find a happy moment and like you said, like a sunset or like for a nice walk or like even as simple as like something I've been doing, not right now because it's pouring in San Francisco, but like I've been just like exploring new neighborhoods in my city that I don't explore and like grabbing coffee there and like walking
Mm.
around and seeing different viewpoints in the city. And that has been something that's not expensive, it's not anything, but it's just been fun, and it's just been relaxing to like, okay, we're gonna see a new part of the city. I love exploring, I love seeing new places, and it just brings me this joy of like very simple, but it's like I'm doing something because I want to, and it makes me happy. And you can find joys in those little things, but you really have to do it. You have to find it because we are alive and we have to figure out how can we have the best life possible. And it's really hard without the people that we love because that makes it just so much harder. It's
Mhm.
like every happy moment was like, it'd be better if my sister was here, if I could call her or my mom or my dad. So I just say, like, be happy. Figure out whatever can make you happy, whether it's a coffee, whether it's looking into your dog's face. You can kind of see him right there. Like, whatever makes you happy, like, just find it and embrace it because we have so many hard moments. So, whatever happy moments you could get, like, that's what we need.
Yeah. And
So,
don't feel guilty.
yes, don't feel guilty. So, it's kind of a nice segue into one, me and Kendall are really big on books in general, and we started like a grief book club. So, it's extra exciting for us. But I think talking about how what inspired you to write your book, to write a book, because I think that's a big thing to take on in general. But then what inspired you to make it about your sister's like legacy, but in like a cool fantasy way? I'm big on like fantasy books. So
Yeah. Okay. So it's funny too. I just recently found some home videos of my sister and of me. And in one of the home videos, like really young Alex is saying like all the things she wants to be when she grows up. And like I'm young. I'm like 5. And I said I wanted to be a writer. And I'm like, how do you even know what writing is? Like and so that I studied English in college and creative writing in college as well, or at university as well. And so I always knew I wanted to write a book. And then after I started a company that basically consumed my life, the thing that got me through these insane days working at this company was this idea that afterwards I would take time to write the novel that I always wanted to write. And this idea is originally the book was going to be a fantasy novel about dreams, a lucid dreamer. So I remember my dreams, I can manipulate my dreams, I'm like very into dreams, and I had this idea of a fantasy series surrounding that. And then, just like that, literally like I wound down my company and I was on this trip, this bucket list trip, uh, that very month, like the day the company ended, I go on this trip. And the plan was that when I got back from this trip, I was going to start writing my novel, and I was on top of the world. I'm in Denali, Texas. I'm in during this trip, and I have to fly home to sort through for things. And it's this juxtaposition of being the happiest and that you've ever been, with everything ahead of you and the worst thing in the entire world happening to you. But we had the celebration of life, which my family put on. But there was this funeral memorial that happened in Kentucky, where Denali's from, with like her family or with Taylor's side of the family, and like I didn't know one person there. And it was very weird experiencing being at a memorial for your sister, not knowing anybody there, just thinking to myself about, this book and everything that was shattered now, and imagining like, where is Denali? And the two kind of thoughts just started to collide. It was like, where did Denali go? Where is she? Like, how is she gone? What's going on with this idea of like a fantasy, not, like everything that I lost. And so I put them together, and that's what started this spark of it's changing the entire topic of this book. And then instead talking about making it around Denali's journey through the afterlife. And this series started to take place. And I remember even just walking up to my dad and saying, I'm going to write this novel about Denali. Um, and so it's now been a year and a half later, and writing a novel has been super cathartic. I mean, I think that if I was to be prescriptive on myself, that writing this book was like how I maintained strength in myself. It was like very, very cathartic. And I think when I would be writing this, I'd almost convince myself that this was true. I would go, there's like parts of the book that are in this afterlife realm, and there's parts of the book that are here, in the now and on Earth. And so I found all of Denali's journals. Everything seemed to be very kismet. Like, who keeps journals? Like, I think I have like a few, but like they're, vast. And I would find Denali had 3. She had 3 journals. And I could really go in and just like get to know Denali even deeper, and, kind of use them to create a character that became super alive. It really feels like Denali. So, this story has been very cathartic to me, and I think a really great way to honor her. It's been a really great way to imagine other people imagining their loved ones in this kind of new afterlife realm. And I think because it's very hard to write a novel, believe it or not, especially when it's becoming 600 pages. And so sometimes during the hard times, when I think about, as much as, there's hard times, you're like, can I actually do this? I imagine this idea that Denali's name is in like the hearts and the minds of other people when this is published and when people read about this, and it keeps me going. So yeah, now I'm at the other end of, I feel like, the tunnel of like the really hard stuff, where I have an editor and we're iterating on this book and taking what so I've written the whole thing, and now it's like this process of really creating something. Like every time we go through it, it's like becomes more and more special. So yeah, I'm like, this is Denali's memory. So I have like perfection in mind, and it's been an insane journey putting this all together.
We are super excited to read it. And like, we are readers already. And we also have such a belief that there's healing in your grief with reading. And so it's something that we also Or trying to just, I think, share to other grievers as well as like, if you're not a reader, maybe you should try reading. Like, it's an escapist form. Like, it's good to process some of these griefy emotions as well if you're not used to it. Is there anything specific that you can share about the book? I don't know, maybe about the plot or like character. I mean, characters if you want. Whatever you really want to share, just for our listeners and really for our own sake, because we're so curious and excited.
Yeah, so it's set in an afterlife realm, and the afterlife realm is very complicated and complex and intense and beautiful. And the storyline is like Lord of the Rings meets Fourth Wing. I'm a big fantasy reader, so it ties on like some of like my favorite books. I also have like been really reading Game of Thrones, so like I find a lot of inspiration with the book Dragons. Each chapter, for example, is like from different characters' points of view that you're following throughout the storyline, which is something that I love. It plays with time, it plays with reincarnation. And I love, and the kind of fun thing too is for people who like you guys that have been following around with my story, it's laden with Easter eggs of like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, didn't Denali like do this, or like these different pieces of my story and Denali's story reflected in really creative ways throughout the book. But yeah, there's magical schools and an afterlife realm, and the individual the protagonist jumps between realms, which is really cool. So like one thing I loved about Harry Potter was this idea that like really anybody can be a hero. This idea that like like writing a story that you can really feel like maybe this could happen to me at any time. Like when you read a fantasy book and you're like you could picture yourself in that. So I don't want to give away too much because there's just so much in the book, but yeah, it's like the best parts of every fantasy book that you've read. I feel like I've tried to put in there, and I think it's a story that hasn't really been told. Like it's a big thing to take on the afterlife, and what does that look like? Yeah, which is why everybody's like, where is it? Where is it? And so the plan is for it to be published this year, later this year.
Oh,
That's what I'm hoping. So my editor and I are working through, and I feel like we'll be have this in a place by its spring, and we'll be able to share it with agents and then get it published for sometime at the end of the year. Yeah,
that is
That's so
so
exciting.
exciting.
I'd be honored if it ever made it on your book list. Like I've been following. You guys have an awesome book club.
Thank you. We'd love to read the book. I'm huge on fantasy, and Kendall's just rereading Harry Potter right now, actually. So she's deep in.
Yeah, I haven't read it since I was a kid, and over winter break, I was rewatching all the movies because we had a whole series last holiday season around like grief and holidays and just like that complicated
Mhm.
things. And so my dad loved Harry Potter. He read it to me as a little girl, and the movies have always been special. He kind of looks like Harry Potter in like a weird kind of way.
Really?
Yeah, like dark hair, glasses, um, always getting into trouble. Like I was like, I haven't read the books in a long time. And I was like, you know what? I mean, I only read it through all the way once and it was spaced out. I was like, geez, there's a lot of things you miss when you
Mhm.
read it out. But then watching the movies all together, I was like, oh my God, I missed like so much as a kid. And then now as an adult, I'm rereading it and I'm like, oh my God, this is so much more in depth and like, and all these little clues that connect. And yeah, about
Mhm.
Easter egg part. And also just like very timely, I think, with things going on in the world to read Harry Potter and feel like some
Yeah.
semblance of like hope and friendship and love and trying to do the right thing. So yeah, rereading the whole thing.
I think I need to do that too. When I was a kid, when I went to a military camp, and one of the Harry Potter books came out, and I actually got in like they reprimanded me for like an entire day because they caught me under the covers like after curfew reading the Harry Potter book with like my headlamp, and then they made me actually, this is pretty funny, they made me square the corners down like whenever I would take a left or take a right, I had a broom in my hand and I had to raise it above my head and yell Quidditch for like the entire day. So you could just like we had like they had staircases that went like this, so you would just hear me yelling down the stairs, Quidditch, 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 Quidditch. It was so I was obsessed. Like I was like and I was like it was worth it. I got to read some of the books, so like it was worth it. But yeah, no, I need to read that again because it is an inspiration. I mean, anybody that read Harry Potter and that now wants to be a fantasy writer, it's all these different books get in the back of your head. And I always loved the idea that Harry Potter was just a person, like he was just a kid. He was like, could have been, and that all of a sudden his life changed. And so I think that's something about death in general is just like all of a sudden your life can change. And so, it would like that kind of became part of this story of like, I've had that very Harry Potter moment where like all of a sudden someone's alive and then their life changes and what happens there. And death is also like just really relatable. I think even if like everybody has a grandparent that dies or like a dog that dies or a pet that dies. So I don't know. It's like a very scary thing that like people don't want to talk about. And I think you guys are like the best people I know at talking about it. And I think one of the most impressive things about you guys is like how your ability to talk about it. But I feel like for a lot of people, it's very scary. So I felt like this book could be a way to make it feel less scary in some way.
Yeah, Rachel and I mean, we talk about this, I feel like all the time of books can make you confront death and grief and those scary concepts without having to directly think
Mm-hmm.
about it. As you know, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you get the anxiety thoughts of like death and like spiraling, and it can be really hard when you have to face it. And if you don't deal with it, like Rachel and I, like day in and day out, you don't want to think about it because it's morbid.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way Rachel and I think about it is like this is a part of life and this is inevitable and you can't avoid it. Like we didn't ask for these things to happen. None of us asked for these things to happen to us, and yet it can happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that Rachel and I, we have very two different type of book tastes, but they're so complementary to each other because where I was deep into like nonfiction and memoirs and like Stephen King type, like really leaning into like trying to learn as much about death as I could to understand it and compartmentalize it, I guess. And that was how I handled it. Whereas like Rachel is like using romance and fantasy as a way to escape it, but the books still have a
Mm-hmm.
plot line of grief. And I think that's so much of real life too, is like life still goes on. You're still going to have like funny moments about life, but grief is still that subplot line that you're dealing with. And so I love that our two tastes like really complement each other and covering like
Yeah.
all pieces around it.
But you both like spicy books, right?
Yeah. Is there spice in that? Is there spice in your book?
Yeah, there's spice. I'm not gonna promise like fourth wing level spice or crown of thorn and roses because I'm a bit of a traditionalist in terms of like, get a bit conflicted because I love good spice. I mean, you gotta have romance, you gotta want people to get together, you
Yeah.
want, like, especially if you have any sort of love line, if there's not gonna be like
Yeah.
if they're not gonna like really get together by the end,
Yeah.
like what are we doing? But I definitely I didn't want it to be like something that carried the plot forward. I really wanted it to feel like, yeah, like a book that was carried on by its plot and its substance instead of its spice, but with spice like sprinkled on the top. The same with violence too. There's a book about death and about
Yeah.
the afterlife and people die in the afterlife and there's like because there's this reincarnation element which I'm always been really fascinated about too, but I didn't want violence and like gore to really like be like what carries this plot forward because you're like that's disgusting, I just want to so I'm still finding that balance, but yeah, you're I gotta write a sex scene about my sister, like what am I doing here, but okay.
To detach a little bit, like it's her, but
Yeah.
it's not her. No,
Exactly.
I need like the love. I definitely prefer a book where there is like a romance love interest. Like I'm reading the Ember of the Ashes series, which is like I'm late to the game on that. It's like this. I have friends that read it like 10 years ago, but I'm on like book 3 and I'm like, you're still not together? Book 3? Where is my happy
Yeah.
ending? Like, come on, get
Hurry up.
together. Like, you've only like kissed twice. Like, and every time it's like, we can't do this. I'm like, book 3? I have nothing yet at book 3. Like, I was like texting friends, like, do they not get together? Like, this is trying to piss me off. Like, what's going on? But it is very plot forward, but it is one of them like, okay, I need you guys to be happy at some point. Like, I need something
No, the
to
key is
hold on
like
to.
you can't have like a gun. Like there's a famous saying that like you can't have a gun, like put a gun in your book and not have it go off by like chapter 3. You You have to keep people going. So I think you're right. Pacing is important, especially like with a romance, because and then they can get together and then break up. It's fine, but like and then get back together. But you gotta have a little spice earlier on.
Yeah, gotta have some romance. I definitely like a book needs that. If it's not, I'm like, I might put it on pause and like go back to it. Like the books I'm reading with no
Me too.
romance are Kendall's picks. Like we read Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. Like definitely not a romance book. So Kendall is the one that gets me to
That
read
was
the
just
not
a
romance.
very different book in its entirety.
Very different book.
Do you recommend it?
It's very short, but it's more so C.S. Lewis being very religious.
Mhm.
He kind of reckons with his questions with God and his faith after his wife passes. And it's definitely like the ramblings and like on the back of the cover, it's like the midnight moments of like the darkest parts of your grief and him
Mhm.
kind of like blurbing about it. And I found it assuring to read. I think somebody gifted it to me after my dad passed, and that even in the strongest of faith, like in darkest times, like you will have doubts about things, but it's all about the pursuit of hope and trying to keep like
Yeah.
remembering that there is light and that like this grief is so immense right now, but it's because there was so much love there. And so it's it's like a diary almost of
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, that's nice.
I
But
think
it's
you
very
have to have
short.
you need like a student mind. I don't think I would have appreciated as much without reading it with Kendall. Because I think Kendall pointed out the different pieces and that made us really reflect and have good conversations about it. But if it wasn't for
Mhm.
Kendall, I probably would have skimmed over a lot of things because my brain goes to like, where's the happy story plot going? And it's not that
Yeah.
book. So there was a lot of good points and like deep thoughts for like, oh, I really get that and whatever. But if it wasn't for Kendall, I probably would have just like skimmed over. Like I probably would have not absorbed the material as much at all. So, but yeah,
And that's
Kendall
why you
made
have
it
Kindle.
interesting. Yeah, it worked out. It was like a pairing. So then we had really good conversations. But without her, I probably would have been like, yeah, I was just a guy rambling, like about his grief, like nothing special. So yeah, there was a lot of good points in there. But yeah, I think you have to sit down with it with like the expectation of what you're getting into to like appreciate the book for sure.
Very much.
Yeah, but we're very excited for your book to come out later this year. I love fantasy, romance, mystery, like fantasy. Sister Lost is going to be like a very interesting plot point in there. I don't think I've read any books recently with that, so I'm excited to read that, and I'll be stalking your stuff to see any updates on that so we can read it. So, where can people find you to keep up with your book journey?
Yep. So the entire series is called the Afterlife series, and book one is the working title is called Realm Jumper. And you can follow me on TikTok with Alex Ostebo is my handle, but also I have a website www.alexostebo.com where you can actually sign up for a like newsletter. So I'll be sending out. I'm trying to not sending out anything until I'm done on the like into the agent process, but you can sign up so that as soon as there is information on where you can purchase and publishing and all of that stuff comes to light. You can be the first to get that information. So they can definitely find me there. But yeah, it looks like 2025 is the year of the Afterlife series.
That's
Yeah.
so
So
exciting.
excited.
It's so exciting to have. We've had a few authors on, and we're gonna continue to have more authors on. But it's always exciting to hear like the inspiration for the story. And I think this is different. It's more unique because I think it's like very connected to your story and to Denali and the inspiration. So I'm really excited to read this book.
Yeah, it's in an interesting spot too, because because I've been telling the story through like the writing process, I feel like that's a very unique thing. I think I have a lot of people that have seen it kind of come together and kind of can find those little Easter eggs and that have been sprinkled throughout just by knowing my story. So yeah, it's like I wanted to make people feel like they were coming along the journey with me, and because I think that the book read through that lens, or even read from someone that like had even if someone doesn't have anybody that's that they've lost, even if someone doesn't have someone that they've lost with grief, they can still relate to the book. So it's kind of like a duality there. But yeah, thanks guys for so much for having me on. I was a little nervous because you guys are so open and comfortable with talking about this. And I feel like I'm much more hiding behind like blurbs and fantasy. And so it's been really great to be able to get real and talk about this stuff with you guys. So keep doing what you're doing because it helps me a lot.
Well, thank you for being a supporter and thank you for sharing so much about your sister with not only us, but with our listeners. And there's so many things that you just said in the past hour. I was like, oh, that's a good, like, little tidbit of advice. Like, had me thinking of different things that Rachel and I normally wouldn't have touched on in our previous episodes. So thank you for like coming to the table
Yeah.
with all that. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, it's been so much
Well,
fun,
awesome.
like, connecting with all these grief people and, like, in this space, and had we not decided to start this last year, it's like, we've met so many new people. I mean, me and Kendall even met through joining a grief support group, so I feel like it's just opened us up so much because we both didn't used to talk about grief, and this is, like, fairly new. I mean, it's a work in progress always. You always can do better, but yeah, we've gotten so much more comfortable with it. It has taken time and having so many conversations with people, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We appreciate you coming on and sharing Denali and your book with us. So we're so excited to follow this up when your book's actually out.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd love to jump on too once the book's out and you guys have read it, and like happy to talk with your
Yes.
readers
Be
and
amazing.
like
Yes.
answer any questions that you guys have. But I feel like that'll be a really fun conversation as well. So
Yeah. Kendall.
so yeah, until that time.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, stay tuned, everyone, for when we have Alex back when the book is in our hands and we've read it. So I'm excited for that part.
You've heard it here first.
Bye, everyone.